Okay, back to preview the ALCS and the NLCS with Walker Buehler. I've got Weller that I got sporting right now, thanks to our friends at Buffalo Trace. What you got going? Anything?
No, I had a long day yesterday. We went to the races early and then tailgate. So today's a day off for me.
Is it Keeneland season, or are
Oh
we
yeah,
at Keeneland weekends?
it's full on Keeneland season right now. Yeah,
Okay,
it's the best.
got to go see Dr. K.
Dr. K.
I love
I
it.
don't have any. I don't have any bourbon either. Should I go get a glass? Maybe you can ask a question and I'll just go grab one.
It's too late
Go
now.
for it.
Too late. It's too late. All right, fine.
So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go through the two NL teams. They get going tonight. AL side got going last night, Rangers and Astros in Houston. We're recording before we get a result in the ALCS. So we are going to end it with, a couple thoughts and get, Buehler's prediction here, but kind of want to walk through team by team, and we'll start in the National League side. And I think like the prevailing story in baseball and kind of the one that's cross-pollinating sports is the Phillies and the vibes that the Phillies have going right now, and the Castellanos fun and the Harper fun, and that Stott Grand Slam is still jumping out to some people. So the last couple weeks when you've watched the Phillies, what's kind of your takeaway from a pitching lens and also from just an overall baseball fan lens?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the overwhelming thought for me on their team, they just have a lot of professional baseball players, right? And I know Harper touched on it and was like, that's why you pay these guys. And that's one way to look at it. There's also just a lot of guys that have played a lot of important Major League Baseball games and have played for a long time. And so you can kind of see where whatever nerves or increase in atmosphere, they're taking it and pulling positives out of it, and it's not going to shrink them. Obviously, we saw them make this kind of run like this last year, and seemingly doing it again. So yeah, just a lot of pros and a lot of guys that have handled the moment well.
Beyond just the players on the field too, I was at Game 4, and the stadium itself was a different kind of experience. The only thing I can really relate it to is that WBC final between the USA and Japan. Just, you can feel the stadium, kind of like in Seattle. They were the 12th man in the Legion of Boom days. You gotta feel a certain level when you walk into Citizens Bank Park that, because everybody on the field is really talented, right? The Braves have plenty of talent too, but it's gotta be another level going into Citizens Bank Park right now.
Yeah, I mean, all those guys, you can see it in the celebration. You can see it in how they talk about going home. You can see it in, they're wearing matching stuff to the field. And there's just there's an energy to it and kind of embracing the moment. And obviously that, I think it goes both ways. It comes from the fans, and then I think it also, the fans feel it from the team. And, it's always been a great sports town, and that team is obviously in the past 2 years been, has made playoff baseball there really exciting.
You've thrown in, yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say outside of Dodger Stadium, because of course when you're at home, you can feel the energy and you feel like you can run through a brick wall. Throughout your entire career, even maybe dating back to your time in college, because playing in the SEC, the fans are also insane. Have you ever felt that in one start during your career that the crowd was bigger than maybe you anticipated, or that you could feel it more than another start?
Yeah, I mean, I always think probably back to my rookie year, that whole kind of playoffs. That was New Atlanta. I gave up the Grand Slam to Acuna. That was you could feel it obviously then. Milwaukee, we had all the stuff with Machado, and he stepped on Aguilar's foot, and so Milwaukee got really interesting there. And that's just an interesting stadium in general. It almost they're cooking the sausages and it smells, and it just has a weird thing, and it's in the dome. But the weird thing in Milwaukee is it's almost got like a haze in there. It's like like if you go into an old bar and it's like there's smoke in there from 30 years ago, like feel that feeling. That's kind of what Milwaukee has a little bit sometimes. So those are probably the two that kind of struck me first, I guess, in my career. New Atlanta, they, with the lights and the chop and all that stuff, there's definitely an atmosphere there. And Wrigley at night is kind of always like that as well, especially, they try and schedule us on the weekends, and it's always a big series. And there was a lot of guys that played against them in the playoffs before I got there. And so that place always has a little something to it.
Quick aside, because aroma is something that like I've entirely phased out. I've become immune to ballpark smells
Right.
working at a ballpark every night. Like, is Milwaukee unique, or do you actually smell ballpark at home in LA?
No, I
'Cause
mean,
feel like that's not a thing.
no, I mean, you think all of the kind of Wisconsin food, right? You think cheese curds and peppers and onions, and it's a dome. And so everything stays in there, and there's just a thing to it. I don't know.
Do you like it or no?
I liked playing there. I don't know. There's something different. I mean, I think the dome is part of that. All the domes kind of have a different feeling to them, but none of them really have that kind of smog in there a little bit.
Got you. So you have been to several postseasons. You've thrown well in several postseasons. Each postseason, it feels like there's a guy that kind of jumps out. And we'll talk Alvarez, we'll talk Seager, who I know you're probably thrilled to see doing it on the American League side. But a Harper and a Castellanos. Nick's just really hot right now. But Harper, this is a consistent thing. He levels up in the postseason. How do you, as a big league pitcher, kind of see Bryce Harper and combat that if you're facing him in the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of success off of me, obviously, especially early in my career. It was super velocity dependent, and he's a guy that can handle velo. And so, right on left can hit breaking balls, and I think you see guys trying to throw him sliders under him, which is a way to get him. But you get a little too much adrenaline, you get that ball's 4 inches too high, and he's going to put it in the seats. And we saw that with the Strider at bat. I saw something where he almost landed like the same seat on the same pitch a couple weeks apart. But that's how you have to attack him, and our game comes down to executing those kind of plans. And he's talented enough. Obviously, we all remember him on everything for forever. And he's just talented, and I think Nick has kind of always been like that. I played with him in the All-Star game one year, and he just has these runs that are different, right? He can just do, he won't hit a homer for a month, and then he'll hit 6 in 2 games. It's like it's just a different deal. But was a really nice dude to me. And I mean, I don't like any of these people being good, but there's definitely some cool stories. And I think in Philly, the thing we don't talk about enough is Buehler and what he's been doing the past couple playoffs. And he was in New York for a long time and didn't really pitch in those big games as much. And now these past 2 years, he's really kind of put himself in that. Who would you want in a huge game? I think Zach Buehler has to be in that conversation.
For sure. I'm really glad you brought up Buehler, because sometimes when I say playoff Buehler all the time and fans ask me, explain that, like, what is he doing differently? And for a guy who's been in these exact situations and dominated in these situations, it's probably hard to define the zone, but guys like Buehler, guys like Harper are in the zone right now. So just from what you're seeing from Buehler, just watching him from the outside looking in, but then also trying to explain what the zone is.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you've never felt that kind of thing, it's hard to, I don't want to say hard to put in words. That feels real cheesy to me, but it is hard to describe. I think the easiest thing I can describe with Buehler is he has so much margin for error relative to some other guys. He's a really big dude. He gets really extended. The velocity is huge. It's mostly based on that. It's a 4-seamer, the little 2-seamer, and the slider. So everything's fast until when guys aren't ready for kind of the playoffs, or they're too amped up and everything starts speeding up, they have even less time against him. And I've told a lot of people the hardest ball I've ever seen thrown when I was hitting was by him, and I couldn't see it. And so I can't imagine in a playoff, 2 outs, man on second, whatever scenario, like how firm some of the stuff he throws can look. And I think it makes sense outside of even his heartbeat or his personality or whatever. I think his pitch mix is just really, really tough in big games.
And I feel like he's putting his fastball wherever he wants in his postseason starts, which is a whole nother layer. We're going to move to the Diamondbacks in a moment, but if I were to put together like a top 5 of guys I want to hear in a post-game interview, you're in the top 5. Castellanos is also in the top 5. Listen, I know you've had some moments. You've had some moments. Castellanos had a couple of electric moments.
Yeah.
Who else rounds out the top 5? Anybody jump to your mind that it's like, I gotta hear this guy when he's on a mic?
Oof. Not really. I mean, it's more the moment and certain guys doing it at the right times, right? I think Kike always has some good stuff. He'll drop some stuff though that like only guys he's played with kind of really understand, which for me is fun. I'm watching some of my buddies, like Jock, I think will say some things. Cody will say some things that are funny to us, I guess, but I think we probably look at it a little bit differently than the public.
Orlando Arcia probably never wants to hear his voice on the mic ever again after what happened.
Yeah, I don't really quite know how to feel. I'm kind of in the middle on that whole scenario.
What do you mean?
Like, I understand why you would expect it to not get out, but I also like, I probably am more that it should have stayed in the locker room, right? You want to, we've talked about that's our place and whatever, but it's interesting that it got out the way that it did.
For sure. Jumping to Arizona here, they, obviously had a tremendous series, and, they kind of won in all phases, and Gallen threw really well and Kelly threw really well in game 1. But Gabby Moreno, Carroll, Alec Thomas, like it's these young bats that are here for the very first time that, kind of like bludgeoned Dodger pitching, which was crazy. What did you see from that offense? Because obviously you were tuned in to every single pitch. Do you feel like this is sustainable going against Philly?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Obviously the way Buehler and Nola are throwing the ball, you gotta believe that they're going to throw the ball well. But Arizona, they just have that young kind of. To me, Young has that little bit of unpredictability to it, and so maybe something on a scouting report they're sitting on, or they do some things that maybe veterans who are super in their ways don't do quite as much. And I mean, I think that series against us is just hard. Like, it's just we never got footing, right? You feel like if we won one of the first 2 games, it's probably a different scenario. But I guess I think hats off to them to play us, a team that's been there, done it a lot, and to sweep us, I think is a big deal and should give those guys a lot of confidence going into this series.
2 things I underrated about the Diamondbacks going into that series against the Dodgers was, first of all, I just think their general fearlessness. Like going in, they didn't seem phased in really any aspect of the game. And then number 2, because I thought they were going to hit. Maybe I didn't think they were going to hit with that kind of power. I knew Gallen and Kelly, those guys would show up. But the bullpen, I thought was incredibly impressive, right? Going into that, we talked about Paul Sewald, right? But we didn't really talk about Kevin Ginkel, right? We didn't really talk about the middling guys in that bullpen who really shut it down for the series. But then we're doing really well in the second half. I think they're going to play a key factor in this playoffs too, because as good as Buehler and Nola are performing, so are Gallen and Kelly. I guess what was something that you didn't really realize about the Diamondbacks that you saw come to fruition in this series?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, but when you get into certain series and you've got your 1 or your 2 throwing obviously a higher percentage of those games than they would in a regular season, right? Your number 1 starter is going to throw 32 games. But if you play 5-game series, he might throw 2 games in that 5 or whatever. I feel like in Arizona, this is the first year they've had starting pitching that really consistently gets them deep into games. Like Kevin Ginkel's been there a long time, been kind of up and down, been a guy they've made throw 2 or 3 innings and stuff like that before. And now he's kind of having these short bursts, and obviously, his stuff over 40 pitches isn't as good as it is over 15. And so these guys have like full on roles where they maybe haven't had that the past few years. And, that can really help certain guys. So, it's an interesting mix of players they have over there, but obviously they're doing something right.
Aside from Evan Longoria, and I'm probably missing, another like seventh inning reliever, that kind of guy.
Yeah.
This is the first rodeo in the postseason for all of them.
Yeah.
And, I'm not sure if you can remember any like pros as opposed to cons when, you made your first trip to the postseason. Could ignorance be a pro? Like, I think the common thinking is the more postseasons you go to, the more comfortable you are and the better you will be.
Right.
But is that entirely the case? Like, is there something about being a postseason rookie that can fire you up in a different way? Like, how do you think they captured this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like saying like ignorance is bliss and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
there's something to like not having the scars of it either, right? Like, you play in the playoffs enough, like you're probably not going to win a World Series every year, so you have lost in the playoffs or you failed in the playoffs. Like, I feel like, at least for me, every time that has happened, like it like stays with you, right? So yeah, you have the same excitement or close to. You probably never have the same excitement as you do your first playoffs, but like that's what we do. That's what we do this for, right? So, but then that excitement has a little curb of like, I was this excited last time and it didn't go so good, right? And so, um, I think there's just less hesitation, maybe, less kind of mental hurdles that you have to like convince yourself that it's going to go good and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of times we talk about young teams or inexperienced teams as a negative in terms of they're going to make mistakes or it'll be too big for them. So I think in some way, if it's not too big for them, that inexperience can be a benefit.
Yeah.
I'm also curious too, because, throughout the series against the Dodgers, for them at least, like there wasn't really that kind of kick in the mouth. I'm curious if they go into Citizens Bank Park, how they respond to that type of energy, because it's easy to look fearless when, you got a lead, but let's see how you do when it's 2-0 in the fifth inning and they're starting to bring in all those bullpen arms.
Yep.
But I still do think that the Diamondbacks are going to be sneaky in this series. I think a lot of people think that the Phillies are just kind of going to steamroll them. But at the same time, the Phillies, right, they've always been the underdog. They've always been the hated team, right? Going against the Braves, a lot of people were picking against them. Now they're the favorite. Do they sit there kind of fat and happy and think, oh, did they lose a little bit of that edge? And did the Diamondbacks keep it? So no, I think it's going to be kind of a clash. You disagree?
No, they're having too much fun, man. I think the edge is one thing to play the underdog, right? But when we can smell it again and you're close to the World Series again, I think it's less about they're just having a lot of fun playing together. And I think that in some way is kind of a similar thing as just being like real chip on the shoulder. You know what I mean? I think
that's a good point.
When you're playing with a group of guys that you really enjoy with, like it's hard to not like be able to buckle down, right? Like it's not about, oh, I want to get a hit, right?
No, so you're totally right. I guess just my main takeaway from watching that series is I just can't count out these snakes anymore. I can't do it. They're just sneaky. They get up and they bite. So I'm trying to look for just other ways of how I could see the Phillies laying down a little bit. My brain says the Phillies win in 4, but the Diamondbacks keep surprising us, so I'm done sleeping on them.
So yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I'm doing any more game number predictions anymore.
No game number? Okay, we'll see. I said Phillies in 5 and a highly competitive 5. I don't want the 5 to be misleading because that sounds lopsided. I don't think so. I just think it's going to come down and they're going to be 5 tight games and the Phillies win 4 of those 5. Peter has yet to give a game prediction. So Peter, quick game prediction. And then you can decide if you want to do one or you can just tell me to move on to the Rangers, jackass.
No, I will go Phillies in 6. I think the Phillies get a win game 1. I think the D-backs steal 1 in Citizens Bank. Then I think it's another 2-2. No, I don't know how it's going to go. Phillies in 6.
We have 5-6. I'll take Phillies in 7.
Phillies in 7. Okay. The Rangers. As we record right now, they are midway through game 1 against Houston. They lead 1-0 in the top of the third. But as much as we can throw that out the window, let's throw it out the window. The Rangers, they got here by hitting the crap out of the baseball against Tampa, and they got here, for 162, and then against Tampa in the wild card, and then against Baltimore as well. This offense is firing on all cylinders, and your guy Corey got the Barry Bonds treatment against Baltimore. That cat walking 5 times. Did you shoot him a text after that? Like, you had to say something to him, man.
He wouldn't respond anyway. No, no, I mean, he's a really, really talented human and disciplined and has an approach, knows what he's trying to do. But, I think one of the interesting things is we see him swing 0-0 so much, right? And I remember talking to somebody about this. I think it was Gomer maybe, but after 0-0, he's like one of the most disciplined hitters in the game. But on 0-0, he swings at like 98% of strikes or something. So it's just, if you get past 0-0, he's not the same. I don't want to say he's not the same hitter, because he's still unbelievable. It's like his approach is just drastically different. And if you don't throw him strikes, he won't swing.
Damn.
Another playoff pitcher that I've been really impressed with. We talked about Buehler being in the zone, but Nathan Eovaldi, man, just back-to-back dominant starts. The fastball's all the way back, and just him being in Texas feels like a good look. It just feels right, kind of like when they say Bryce Harper matches Philly. Nathan Eovaldi matches Texas.
Right.
What have you seen from Eovaldi so far?
I think it's interesting, man. We talked about Texas being they've been hitting and whatever, but before the season they were paying 6 starting pitchers, right? And now they went out and got 2 more, and still the one guy that we probably weren't talking about as much, obviously DeGrom and all these guys, but was Eovaldi. And so he's always been a playoff guy and seemingly loves it. And it's just cool to see him kind of evolve. That splitter's a new thing. And typically guys that have had another Tommy John won't start throwing a splitter, but he kind of, kicked that in the mouth, and it's been pretty cool to watch.
Feels like they have guys that are ready to just go out and like try and get outs. It's a very Bruce Bochy thing, and I'm not saying that like any pitcher goes out there and says, you know what, like I'm gonna kind of get deep in counts. Like everybody wants to get a bunch of outs, but Eovaldi is that bulldog competitor. Scherzer just got added to the ALCS roster. Scherzer's a guy that's been hampered all year. He's, obviously showing signs of age for pretty much the first time in his career. What do you expect from guys like this as like the wear and tear of a season couples with them being in their mid to late 30s? Are they just emptying the tank? Like Max Scherzer, what is that guy thinking mentally when he gets the ball game 3?
Yeah, I mean, I know he talked about he had some light bulb moment in the bullpen, and that's interesting. And then he had through a sim game, I guess. So I not being there, I don't really know what to expect in terms of pitch count or expected length. Obviously, I don't know how long that sim game was, so that kind of dictates a lot going forward, especially he's been out a couple weeks. So we'll see. He's still Max Scherzer, and he's still, probably a walking Hall of Famer, and obviously you're going to put the guy on your team if he says he can go. So I'm going to hold a little bit of judgment back on that one. We're just going to have to kind of see where he's at.
Sure.
I really want to ask you about someone a little bit younger. Evan Carter has also been a stud rookie outfielder. Felt like he was in the minor leagues a couple of minutes ago, and now he's on the bright stage and hitting 5th in this electric Rangers offense.
Yeah, I faced him in AAA.
Oh, yeah, you did. You scored against Round Rock. So that was Evan Carter and Foscue. There were some studs on that team.
What did you think of him when you saw?
I mean, not much. He swung at the first pitch that I'd thrown in a game in like 450 days. So
what do you do with it?
He got out. I forget what he did. Maybe he lined out, but I wasn't too thrilled. I thought I would like get to throw the ball and they'd throw it to the thing and whatever, and he just swung. But no, obviously, I remember reading an article about him in spring, and there's been stuff coming out now about how he wasn't on. There was some scout in his area that was like, he's the only guy that I've ever seen in the get drafted in the top 5 rounds, and I had no idea who they were. And this is an area scout, right? And so, so kind of some alternative scouting or deep dive scouting or whatever you want to do, but led them to get him, and he's made his way up quick and is obviously performing. But they seem to do a pretty good job. They've had some pitchers, but they seem to develop hitters pretty well down there, especially recently. You look through that lineup, a lot of those guys are really homegrown, and the guys that are not necessarily carrying them, but when you pay a guy like Corey or Simeon, you expect them to carry you. But what's the kid's name? Young, however you say it, Heim. They might not come up there, but like they're Texas Rangers, right? And they've gotten a lot better since they've been there. And I think this kid's kind of the next one of that wave.
Who's the deepest opposing lineup you've seen? Like, was there a certain, I don't know, I know the Rockies were really good when you first came up. Like, is there a certain team that jumps out, like 1 through 9, they can all get to me if I make a mistake? Because that's what we're seeing right now. Like, Young's hitting 8th, Leote's hitting 9th.
Yeah. There's been some really good ones. Colorado in 18, I think it was just a lot of guys that growing up, their name, right?
Yeah.
Daniel Murphy was on that team, and what was the guy's the shortstop from Washington that played center field in Colorado, Ian Desmond. Like they had a lot of like Cargo was still there, and so like that team felt really deep. 18 Boston was really deep.
I think your dogs hate the Rockies, by the way.
Yeah, they don't like them. Who else? The Braves the past few years, I think, you can't not mention that team.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come to mind. I'm sure I'm forgetting some crazy lineup, but there's some good ones. It's part of it now, man. There's a lot more ways to be a successful major league hitter now than there probably was 10 years ago, at least perception wise. And so I think fans and organizations and everybody's getting smarter in that way, right? Like Adam Dunn would have made $250 million now. Yeah. But he wasn't the prototype for that time. And Max Muncy is kind of that roller, walks a ton, hits a bunch of homers and strikes out some. Like that's a successful hitter. Everyone's afraid of him, right? But I think 15 years ago he wouldn't be known as kind of the player that he is.
In terms of the lineups left, because Phillies fans would say they have the best lineup. Diamondbacks fans are sitting there, be like, we hit 4 home runs in an inning. How are we not the best lineup? Rangers fans are like, we've had the best lineup. And then Astros fans are saying, well, we have Jordan, Altuve, Tucker for you, right? Because I think you can make an argument just, from the outside looking in, who has the best lineup based on the stats. But if you were starting against any of these lineups, which one do you think would be the toughest matchup for you?
I think purely on kind of the guys that can win a game on their own, and especially a lot of them being left-handed. For me, Philly, I think, would probably be the toughest matchup of the group. Because Harper, Schwarber both see me pretty good. Bryson Stott see me pretty good. It's not necessarily like one is better or worse than the other. It's just, for me, that matchup is probably the hardest of the 3 or of the 4. But I also haven't faced kind of this new wave Arizona teams. These young guys haven't faced much. So I don't know. My gut would say Philly, but I think they're the only ones that like their lineup as it stands, I've had like a decent amount of experience with. So kind of like we were saying, the playoff thing, like I got some scars with Philly. So
yeah,
I'll go with that. Obviously Houston and what they've done the past, 7 years, like they're doing something right over there or something, what they're doing something over there. So it's good, but I Philly's probably for me.
So jumping to Houston, I'm of the thinking that like, if it's, feasible, if you've got a runner on base, maybe less than 2 outs, like I'm just not pitching to Yordan Alvarez if I'm an opposing manager right now. And I know you as a pitcher are like, no, I'm going to go kick his ass. But how do you attack Yordan Alvarez right now? Because it's hard enough in the regular season. I think he's sporting like a 990 career OPS. Yeah. This guy somehow levels up in the last 2 postseasons. Yeah. When you watch Yordan Alvarez, are you sitting there as like spellbinded everybody else that's sitting there watching him?
Yeah, I mean, he seemingly hits everything hard, which is tough.
He seems to hit everything hard. It's tough.
Yeah, like I don't know. It reminds me of Freddie when he was in Atlanta pitching against him in the playoffs, where it's just hard to get him off rhythm, off time, whatever you want to say. So I don't know. It would be a scouting deep dive, I think. But in certain situations, I remember we kind of scouted JD Martinez like that in 18 in the World Series. It was like, hey, he can't beat us. We got to get a ball up and close to him to kind of get him off the plate. So, I don't know if guys have really done that yet to him, but without looking at all the numbers, I guess that would probably be the first thing is try and get a ball close to him and hope it's not a strike and hope he doesn't hit it in the seats.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question because Jordan and Bryce Harper, I feel like, are the two guys that are just taking the postseason by storm, and not only just taking it by storm, but doing things on historic levels that we just don't see often. So I was hoping if you could divulge into a couple other guys that you felt were just completely unconscious. You kind of mentioned JD and you mentioned Freddie Freeman. Was there anybody else that has kind of come to mind?
Yeah, Rosario in 21 with Atlanta. For
Eddie
sure.
Rosario?
Eddie Rosario, yeah, NLCS MVP in 21.
True. But like just him saying Eddie Rosario, Bryce Harper, and Jordan Alvarez in the same sentence is crazy. Like I know what Eddie did.
The numbers.
The numbers. He was Bonds in
that
the
kind of fires me up now. Like Eddie Rosario belongs to this conversation. Okay, I'm in it.
Corey in 2020.
Yeah.
He
was on your side.
Freeze whenever he played in the playoffs. But, those are kind of the ones I can remember. We had a lot of guys play really well in 20. Cody had a couple really big boy games and big boy swings, and Jock has always been a guy that's been really good in the playoffs, and kind of those guys that kind of switch gears and go to a different place, I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. The Mount Rushmore of these guys: Corey Seager, Jordan Alvarez, Bryce Harper, and Eddie Rosario. I mean, what a Mount Rushmore.
Pretty much. Bullpen wise, it feels like it's impossible to square up Brian Abreu out of that pen, and then Presley follows, and he is the master of spin. It's 2,600 on the heater, and then like 3,000 on the curveball.
Yep.
How do you feel as a Verlander or a Fromber or a Christian Javier saying, I just need to go 6 because I hand it to whoever for the 7th and then Abreu for the 8th and Presley for the 9th?
Yeah, I mean, obviously super talented bullpen. Them and Philly both have really big boy bullpens, and we've kind of touched on the other ones already too. But just the way the game is right now, man, and especially in the playoffs where you kind of have that feeling of like let it eat all the time. It's about this 5 or 7 games. You're going to see guys throwing a tick up and a tick harder and more spin and more XYZ. So you just got to hope, I guess, as a hitter. I don't really know shit about it, but you just got to hope as a hitter that adrenaline makes the bat head move a little faster, I guess, and clip something. But I think I was talking to somebody about the playoffs the other day, and the only way I could really explain it from whatever point of view is like sometimes in the playoffs, like you're playing blackjack, like you got to split kings. Like you have to take like what you do well and like really try and make the big win, right? And so you see a lot of these guys that the 1-for-4 with a homer is a big deal in the playoffs. It's a good day at the ballpark for a guy, but it's not like, oh, he carried it. Like you hit the right homer at the right time, or you make the one big pitch in trouble, like you win the momentum game, and that's a huge part of the playoffs. And for me, that was that analogy of like, yeah, I can have my kings, I'll probably win, or I'll split them and maybe I can win twice. I think that's a huge part of playoff baseball.
The reason I laughed when Jack asked that question about Brian Abreu and Ryan Presley is at this point in the postseason, all of these teams are so good and they have guys who we just marvel at that it's so hard to articulate a question to even ask, like, what makes Brian Abreu's 98-mile-an-hour heater with a slider so unhittable? And you're
no, it's like,
I don't fucking know. It's unbelievable. And that's, I feel like, just a continued thing. And a guy that keeps eliciting that response to me when he's on the mound, especially in the playoffs, is Christian Javier.
Yeah.
And I have been on the wrong side of him. I love Sonny Gray in that matchup against the Astros at home in Minnesota. I know there was the glare, but what do you take away from a guy who is just basically relying on 2 pitches, right? It's his fastball and his slider. Obviously,
Yeah.
he's got the taste breaker curveball, but, and again, I don't even have a question for you other than how is he so good, Walker? What's so good about him? But how do you operate like that with 2 pitches?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a really good case study or example of like what Houston is doing to get to whatever the 7th CS in a row or whatever. They're taking these guys that we don't generally see as like prototype for succeeding at the level that they are, and they find a way, whether it's how they scout or how they, whatever. There's something going on inside that clubhouse in terms of from the pitching side where they're getting a lot out of guys that weren't first overall picks, right? Like it's one thing to get this Skeens kid and he's really good and he's in the playoffs and he's really like, that's one thing. It's another thing to, if you look at some of the backstories of these guys and what they signed for and now what they're doing, like it's pretty crazy. Framber's like that and Javier was like that. So kind of not as regarded as I guess their performance now would say. And so I guess, it's another, I don't want to do another, tip of the cap to Houston.
Right. I think it was Valdez was a $10,000 IFA guy when he was like 18 or 19. And then Javier was kind of same deal, like after his 16th birthday, and he was like a $10,000, $15,000 guy.
Yeah.
All right. Again, we'll give you the opt-out if you want it. I said Texas in 6, and I think the cumulative final score is 1,005 to 1,004. I think everybody scores a ton of runs because the offenses are just going to match each other. Peter, where are you at? And then Walker, you can tell us to F off, or you can give us a number.
Yeah, I really want to pick the Rangers, in 6 or 7. I love the way Montgomery's been pitching. I love the way Eovaldi's been pitching, and the offense is just unconscious, and they can beat anybody on any given day. But I've learned my lesson betting against the Houston Astros. They're just inevitable. They have the Infinity Gauntlet, and they just need another stone. I have the Astros in 7. I can't pick against them.
For vibes.
They're just going to keep doing it, right? We could talk about, the Rangers, great starting pitching right now. The offense, Astros. Astros.
Noted.
I don't know in how many. Astros.
You're in ass covering season. It's fine. No, I mean, I would like to see the Rangers win. I don't know. You've kind of had these big performances and then they're winning these games by a lot of runs, right? And so you're kind of like curious, well, maybe are they still going to score like that when they don't have a lead or like when the starting pitcher doesn't have a great start? So, things have kind of gone perfectly for them. And so similar to what we were talking about Arizona, like if somebody gets punched in the face, what happens? But I think with the age and the veterans that they have, I think they'll be able to handle it. I think we obviously know Houston can and has. But no, I want Texas to win.
Yeah. And you want Corey to go to the World Series.
Yeah.
I just have a deep, dark feeling that the starting pitching, right? Eovaldi versus Framber, Jordan Montgomery versus Verlander, it's going to be neck and neck. And then Chapman's going to come in against Jordan in a big spot. And I think we know how that's going to go. That's where I think the separator is here because both offenses are great. Both starting pitchers are awesome.
Yeah.
But I think this series will be decided in the end of games. And I don't think Texas really had to use their bullpen against the Orioles when they were up by 8-7 runs every single game. And I think that's going to come back to bite them. I still think the Texas Rangers are a great team, but the Houston Astros are inevitable.
We are getting closer to your charity golf outing. What is prep looking like for that? Because it's November 10, November 11?
No, the 12th and the 13th. So, we're pretty full. Got a few guys coming in town to kind of play with some teams. We let them do 4 or 5 sims this year, and then if you only had 4, we're trying to bring in some guys to play and some former teammates and stuff. So that'll be fun. But we're getting there, and then putting together. We will do our auction online again. So that'll all be done through my Instagrams or put up some game use stuff and some, stuff you can't get, at Dick's Sporting Goods of mine, and maybe have a golf trip or two up there. So, yeah, it'll be cool. BuehlerFamilyFoundation.org, but it'll all be on my Instagram if you guys follow me.
And it'll all be linked in the episode description too. I just have a question about the course. What's the course record, by the way, in case I roll through and just want to beat it?
I'm not sure. I don't play there much. I'm not a member there. We had to move it. So, unfortunately, they're fixing up my country club, so we couldn't do it there this year, but we're doing it at Keen Run, which is a cool course. They have the membership there is actually pretty cool. You can join 2 courses, one of which they play the Barbasol at, which is a tour event. And then the other one is kind of a different, more of a fun course. They have like a 9-hole par 3 at the turn. You walk it, and it'll be a good time.
I love that.
You know, I'm not worthy of getting the course record when I mention, oh, what's the course record? And Walker doesn't
Yeah, we didn't need
talk
to
shit
address
to
it.
me. He doesn't even talk shit to me. He just goes on to, oh, I'm not really sure, but it's a nice
Right.
course. Kind of mean, but whatever.
Yeah, we didn't need to address it.
I'll just have to work with it.
Hey,
Doggo's been active. Walker Buehler, appreciate you, man. Enjoy the week, and we'll talk to you ahead of the World Series. Cool?
sounds good.
Awesome.